Dzień dobry. Witam Państwa na kanale Wielka Szachownica.
Today we have a special episode, the first one on the channel in English. My guest is Ivan Fechko, a student at Taras Shevchenko University in Kyiv, a member of the Latin American and Caribbean Research Program of the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. Hi, Ivan.
Hello, thank you for invitation.
Ivan, my first question. How looks the relations between Ukraine and countries of Latin America? Which country in this region is Ukraine's most important partner now?
Thank you for the question, and I would like to start with specification what Latin America is, what is region, because Ukraine and Poland, to be honest, they are far away from this region. And let's just mention that Latin America consists of 32 countries, and therefore they have 32 votes in the United Nations General Assembly. Also, it's 600 million people, and it's a large resource of natural resources like the one we need in the future, like, for example, and it's also $9 trillion in GDP. And in my opinion, this region really has everything the world needs now and in the future, like, for example, energy, traditional fuels, gas and oil, alternative green energy. This is very important. But unfortunately, during the last 30 years of independence, I mean the period before the full-scale invasion that happened 2 years ago, Ukraine did not pay much attention to these countries at all. There are different reasons of this situation. First of all, this is about geographical remoteness. We understand, yes, that Latin American countries are very far from us. Also, we had a lot of problem in our internal policy in our country. We had different revolutions, for example, and so we were very busy and concentrated at what happened in Ukraine. Also, in our foreign policy, we had orientation, first of all, towards our neighboring countries and the United States. And then when this full-scale invasion happened 2 years ago, we needed the support of each country of the world. For example, in the United Nations, yes, and we needed the support to isolate Russia in general. So we began to turn to them, and we started to talk to these countries, to these politicians. So they started to support us. But many people from these countries had little idea what Ukraine is in general. And it showed to us that we need to start this work. We need to start communication to persuade them to support us and explain them a lot of things. Establish at the general this relationship, because as I mentioned, we had not much before this full-scale invasion. But Russia, for example, at the same time, the situation with Russia and the influence of Russia in Latin America totally different, because first of all, they illegally inherited the entire diplomatic legacy of the Soviet Union. I mean, a lot of embassies, consulates, different institutes. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russian Federation, they created a large network of spies. They spent huge amounts of money on propaganda. For example, maybe you hear about Russia Today, Sputnik, yes, this very big media, that did just propaganda sources. And of course, it's a fact that they were bribing local politicians and journalists as well. And due to much larger resources they have in comparison with our country, they have much more influence than Ukraine. And this is once again showed us that we need to do some things to change the situation, to improve our relations between Ukraine and the countries of South America. Also, you asked about our most important partner. If we talk about the period before the full-scale invasion, of course, for us, the most important countries were 3 countries that are the part of G20. I mean, Mexico, Argentina, and the most important is Brazil, because Brazil, we have no doubt, Brazil is really a superpower, is very strong economy, one of the, I guess, 7 strongest economy in the world. It's also our strategic partner. We had this strategic deal before the war, but after the war situation is difficult due to the position of current Brazilian government of Lula. But if you talk about the most important country before the war, I would mention this, like Brazil, Argentina, Mexico.
Yeah, but what has changed during the war? What does the support for Ukraine do? The countries of South America have worse relations with Russia now? What do you think about it?
I'd like to divide the countries of Latin America into three groups, depends on their position to this war between Ukraine and Russia and in general Russian aggression. So first group is friendly countries to Ukraine, and I would like to call them our allies in the region. First of all, if you talk about Central America, we have allies like Guatemala. Yes, it's a small country. Guatemalan government supported us very much, and they did a lot of things. For example, ex-president of Guatemala, he was the first leader of Latin America who visited Ukraine during the war. And also in the Central America, we have support from, for example, Panama and Costa Rica as well. So these countries are very loyal to us, and they are our friends. Also, in the South America, we have support from Chile, and from president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, who is president from left party, but he is from a young generation of left politicians, and he totally understands the situation in Ukraine, that Russia started this honest aggression. So Chile condemned this aggression and supported Ukraine. And last year we had election in Argentina, where the winner was President Javier Milei. I think you heard about this unordinary man. Yes, very interesting politician, so-called libertarian, and he also totally supported Ukraine. He condemned Russia aggression. He told that Putin is aggressor, that is a dictator, and he also proposed to host the summit between Ukraine and the country of Latin America. This summit is supposed to be in Latin America region, I think in Buenos Aires, maybe even this year, and it will be a great thing, a great moment in the process of establishing better relations with these countries. So I say that Argentina could be our greatest partner with this President Javier Milei. The second group of the countries this is the biggest group. This is a neutral countries that condemn Russian aggression, but they are not support Ukraine so much. Yes, they don't impose sanctions, for example. They don't condemn Russia more radically than the countries I mentioned before. I mean, now it's this neutral group, countries like Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and many others. Because, for example, 26 countries from Latin America, they voted for pro-Ukrainian resolution in the UN Council and the UN General Assembly. They supported Ukraine and Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty, but we don't have much more actions from their sides, and that's a problem for now. And the third group is the countries pro-Russian. There are a few of them, and all of them are authoritarian dictatorial regimes such as Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. They have very tight relations with Russia because, as you understand, all authoritarian regimes are very closer to each other. So they supported Russia, and they supported Russian aggression. They supported, for example, annexation of Crimea and annexion of these 4 regions that Putin made the start of the full-scale invasion. And now what Ukrainian government and we as a part of civil society are going to do to improve the situation and to establish new contacts, new relations with Latin American countries with goal that they are going to support Ukraine and to condemn this Russian aggression. First of all, we have this formula of peace proposed by President Zelensky, and we invited all countries from a so-called global south. It's not only Latin America, but Africa and Asia as well, to participate in this discussion, how to bring the peace, not only here in Ukraine, but in general in the world. Because as we know, Russian aggression started different problems, and it is really challenge for the world order. because after the Russian aggression, we have seen many tragedy, many conflicts in other parts of the world. Yeah, for example, in Middle East or also in Latin America, for example, the situation in the territorial disputes between Venezuela and Guyana. So we invited these countries to have this discussion. We proposed 10 points. For example, they can discuss about food security, about nuclear problem, about other very important things, for example, like restoration of territorial integrity of Ukraine. And this year we are going to host a global peace summit in one of the European country with these countries of global south. We are expecting that the countries from Latin America also are going to participate in this. Also, as I mentioned before, we are going to hold Ukraine Latin America Summit. It's also a proposition from Volodymyr Zelensky because he wants to discuss this issue in private, offline, with the leaders of Latin America, because Latin American countries and Latin American politicians, they don't know much about Ukraine because Ukraine is far away from them. We need to explain them the situation, what's going on here, because the problem we have here is really very common for them, very understandable, because they also had in their history different aggressions, dictatorship, different genocides also, and they would understand this, but we need to explain our position and what's going on here, what Russia and Putin doing in our country. Also, we invited Latin American countries to participate in such format as Crimean Platform. It's a platform of different countries from Europe, from other regions as well, where we discuss the situation about Crimea, occupation of Crimea, and how to back Crimea to Ukraine, because it's very crucial moment, very important moment to restore the global security, the peace in the world also. And as you see, there are many things to do. We have a lot of challenges to make allies in Latin America. But it's very important that our government and Ministry of Foreign Relations, they understand these challenges. And for example, this year, the Ministry of Foreign Relations, they established this document, strategic document about development relations with Latin America. It's first time in our history. And also they opened new embassy in the region. Now we have 6 ambassadors in Latin American regions. In my opinion, it's not enough. We have to establish at least 10 embassy more. For example, we can use your experience. In my opinion, Poland did a great job with establishing relations with Latin America. And also we can use experience of Turkey or other countries to improve the situation and to have these allies. Because as I said, it's not only important for economical reason, for example, for trade and for other more practical things, but it's very important really to stop the war, because when all countries or much countries from Latin America will support Ukraine and condemn Russian aggression, then we will be able to isolate Putin, and only this way would bring the peace in Ukraine, in Europe, and restore the peace situation and bring the world we knew before this full-scale invasion.
Yeah, of course, but maybe you know about it. How many people from Ukraine live in Latin American countries? For example, I read some articles about Ukrainian minority in Brazil. Maybe in other country in this region live people from Ukraine.
It's a great question. It's very important when we talk about the relationship between Ukraine and Latin America, because indeed we have a lot of Ukrainians, descendants of Ukrainians who lived here in Ukraine, but then they move on, migrate to Latin American countries. This migration started very long time ago, at the end of 19th century. So they have been living in this region for 130 years at least. And we call this community, I don't know if you have this word in Poland, diaspora. Diaspora means Ukrainians who live in some country, for example, in Argentina or Brazil, and they preserve Ukrainian language, they still have this tradition, and they understand that they are Ukrainians. And you mentioned Brazil. Yeah, we have a large community, large diaspora in Brazil. It's difficult to say amount. I think at least 500,000 Ukrainians and their descendants actually live in Brazil. Also, we have a very big diaspora in Argentina. It's maybe 200,000 of Ukrainians, and they have their own voice. They supported Ukraine. They have different manifestation, and they are trying to persuade their government to help Ukraine. They promote our brand and our position. For example, last year, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov visited Brazil, and he had meetings with President of Brazil Lula, for example, Foreign Minister Vieira, and Ukrainian diaspora. They organized this very big manifestation, and many media of Brazil, they watched it, yeah, and this is really important because, for example, if we see the pool, like this pool of social opinion, so we can see that, for example, in Brazil, the situation is very simple, very similar what we have, for example, in European countries. I mean that at least 70% of population, they support Ukraine. So they could press on the president, government, that they also supported Ukraine and don't support Russia. And yeah, to sum up, the Ukrainian diaspora is very important for us. And also after the full-scale invasion, as you know, because I have to use this opportunity to mention and to thank you for the support. Polish people that they hosted, they helped a lot of Ukrainian refugees as well. Many refugees, not so many, of course, as in Poland, but also few thousands of Ukrainians. They migrated to Latin American countries, to Mexico, to Chile, Argentina, Guatemala, and they have established different organization, foundation of Ukrainian community, and they also doing their job to promote Ukraine and to help Ukraine with different things.
Okay, Ivan, I have last question. What do you recommend to read and watch about Ukrainian politics?
I think you can follow the events in Ukraine, especially related to the war or the internal policy, through the leading Western media, because in my opinion they are accredited, they work in Ukraine, their journalists are on the front line. But keep in mind that this information that they share is often inaccurate information, because we have war now and there are many misleading, there are many false news, provocation. Often this provocation made by Russia propaganda as well. And therefore, I would also like to recommend you, of course, to read Ukrainian mass media, because if you want to understand what is happening here, you have to see our position. And as far as I know, such popular media agencies as Ukrainian Pravda, Kyiv Post, Kyiv Independent, Euromaidan Press, they publish very good materials in English, so you can read them. And of course, you can also follow the events in Ukraine through the social media of Ukrainian institutions. For example, the General Staff of Ukrainian Army, the Ministry of Defense, the President of Ukraine, they all have English languages pages on Twitter, for example, so you can follow the information there. And maybe the last one, it's not about news, but I read this book and it's really interesting, and it's very maybe useful to understand how is the situation in the, you asked me about the politicians now, so you can read this new book, The Showman Inside the Invasion That Shook the World and Made a Leader of Volodymyr Zelensky by Simon Schuster. Yes, this book was in the media, and there are different thoughts about this book, including in Ukraine. Many people maybe don't like this book, this position, but I found this very interesting to understand better the situation from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, how reacted the president, the government, the situation in general. So please don't forget about Ukraine, read, watch news, because the situation, for example, now on the front line, very difficult. I just recently, before our interview, I had telephone call with my friend soldier from the front line. He have mates also on the front line in the near Avdiivka, and the situation is very difficult because we have no more troops, we have no enough amount of ammunition. So the situation is difficult, and we have to remember that the war is still here in Ukraine, in the Europe.
Yeah, of course. I think in Polish media we should have more topics about Ukrainian politics, not only about situation on the Polish-Ukrainian border. My guest today was Ivan Fechko, a student at Taras Shevchenko University in Kyiv, a member of the Latin American and Caribbean Research Program of the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you for having me.
To już wszystko na dziś. Zapraszamy do odwiedzenia naszych mediów społecznościowych, do których linki znajdą Państwo w opisie odcinka. Zapraszamy również do subskrybowania naszego kanału. Do usłyszenia.